Hello, everyone. Oh, hi, everyone. I think we're ready to start. Hopefully, you can all hear me. Oh. Hopefully, you can all hear me. Welcome to this session called Common Ground Global Baseline Building Trust Through Climate Transparency. And I'm joined by 4 wonderful panelists today who I'll introduce shortly. Maybe just to share a few words of introduction for all of you. So the journey towards, as we all know, a climate resilient future demands unprecedented levels of capital mobilization. And as key contributors to this transition, multilateral development banks, they recognize that harmonized action and transparent reporting, as we'll hear today, are indispensable. And this is the premise of building block 5 under the MDB Paris Alignment Framework. And in parallel, the emergence of the ISSB, and we have here today Elizabeth Seeger, ISSB member, offers a global baseline of sustainability-related financial disclosures. So the principles of the ISSB help provide a practical and market-informed foundation to strengthen transparency, enhance comparability, and connect the reporting of companies and financial institutions with their stakeholders, mostly investors, while serving also as a building block for additional reporting for additional stakeholders. So in this session, which will be just under an hour, we'll be exploring how several MDBs, we have AIIB, EBRD, NIB, are engaging with the ISSB standards, not as a compliance exercise, but as a strategic tool. And so maybe just to kick us off, I'm here with Ajay, who is the Vice President Investment Solutions at the AIIB, and prior to joining AIIB in April 2025, so relatively recently, Ajay served in prominent leadership roles within the government of India for over 3 decades. So Ajay, maybe I'll let you deliver a few opening remarks. And I do want to thank AIIB for its leadership ever since COP28 with the Multilateral Development Bank Declaration of Support for the ISSB's climate-related disclosures, all the way to publishing its first ISSB report a couple of months ago, I think. So Ajay, if you want to maybe share a few words of introduction.
So thank you very much for having me here. And it is indeed my pleasure to be with you and talk to you a little bit about what we are doing in terms of sustainability reporting, why why we should be doing this, and what is the value around this. So let me first give you a little bit of background of our bank. Our bank is one of the newest multilateral development bank, which we set up in 2016. We are just turning about 10 years. And our shareholders are 110 countries in the world. If you leave aside World Bank, which has the largest number of shareholders, we have the second largest shareholders, country as shareholders in our bank. We were set up in 2016. In last about little more than 9 years, we have grown to be a bank with an entire balance sheet size of $65 billion US dollar. The bank. If you consider total number of projects that we have approved, more than 330 projects we have approved. The total value is more than 62 billion US dollars, and in 39 countries. Most of these countries are in global south, the emerging economies. So this is what our profile is. We fund, we call ourselves Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. So as the name suggests, our focus is on a sustainable infrastructure. Not only simply investment in infrastructure, but in the sustainable infrastructure. So each project that we approve, each financing that we approve, we give a policy assurance to our board that it is aligned with Paris Agreement, and this is something which we do. We also raise money because, the question is, I mentioned that we we have invested about, balance sheet size is about 65 billion US dollar. Our capital, which we have got from our investor, is about 20 billion. So from where this additional $45 billion have come? So actually we go to the market, issue sustainable bonds and raise money from the market. And this is what that keeps the bank going. So this actually we are going into the private sector, raising private capital and investing in the infrastructure. And then the private investors, they are not going to they are not giving us the money for charity. They are actually seeking returns. And this is what, when they see that we are able to generate returns out of infrastructure and sustainable infrastructure, they invest. In fact, for the last 2-3 years, every year we have raised about 10 billion US dollars from the private market, from the bond. And each time our bond gets subscribed by multiple times. So, I mean, just imagine that we are raising 10 billion US dollars. And if we were to keep, all the oversubscribed amount, we may perhaps as well raise about $30-40 billion every year. So I think this is the kind of a scale of the operation. And the moot question is that how are we able to do this? Because, we have been able to, over the last 10 years, we have been able to create, because of our transparency, because when we take the money, we invest in the project, when we give the policy assurance, and then our investors are sure that their money is going to get invested into sustainable infrastructure, something which will support climate. And so what we also publish, that our total financing, climate financing, we had our goal that by 2024, our climate finance will be 50% of our total finance. We exceeded that goal 1 year before in 2024. And so much so that our climate finance was 67% of our total finance, 67%. Out of that, 72% was on mitigation, 28% was on adaptation. So this is and because of this achievement, this year we actually revised our corporate strategy. And what did we do? We said that instead of having a goal of 50% financing, which we have already achieved, now onwards, every year we will exceed 50%. We will exceed 50% climate finance. So this is what we have done. So now, and then the question arises that in this world, the people can make any claim. How do you validate that claim that our money, the 50% or whatever percentage goes toward the climate finance? So there is a very standard methodology. The joint MDB, Multilateral Development Bank methodology, which actually gives you the method to calculate that how much of your financing is the climate financing. And this is how, we do that and we report. And we also have a very, very strong ENS standard safeguards within the bank. Each project has to maintain that standard. And those standards are not something which, we do this as our sweet will. It is mentioned in our articles of agreement with our shareholders. So articles of agreement is like our Bible. I mean, it's like our constitution. So we are bound by the articles of agreement to align with this Paris Agreement, align with the ENS standards and so and so. So this is what we have been doing. So when this sustainability reporting, ISSB came up in, I think, after this Glasgow, the COP, and after that, the G20, G7, IOSCO, the whole movement, and ISSB was tasked with this developing these standards. So they came up with the standards sometime, I think, in the middle of 2023, and 2024 was the first year in which the the sustainability reporting could have been done. Now, the countries around the world, they are trying to adopt ISSB's sustainability standards. The regulators around the world, banking regulator, or the capital market regulators, or the governments, they are trying in the process of framing laws. So far the AIIB is concerned or the MDBs are concerned, we don't have any regulator. Like, like commercial banks have a national regulator, we don't have any regulator. Our regulators are the shareholders. And so even though there were no regulatory compulsion on our side to go for the ISSB reporting, we voluntarily chose to go for sustainability reporting in the very first year itself. So 2024, we prepared our report and published our first report, and in the month of August this year. So we became almost the first multilateral development bank to have gone for this sustainability reporting. And then of course the EBRD, and EBRD has actually gone ahead. EBRD also has gone, and gone to the assurance. So this is something that, which we would like to follow your example, the EBRD's example. So this is what these are the things which are very, very important. One point that I would like to mention here is that this sustainability reporting, why sustainability reporting? This actually reminds me of my, my previous life, because prior to joining AIIB, I used to be the accounting and auditing regulator of India. I was chairman of National Financial Reporting Authority. And there, we found that this, the entire IFRS standards and accounting standards and assurance standards, they play a very great role, and they have a lot of historical perspective, why those standards were developed. In fact, there are two very interesting stories which I always would like to very briefly mention. In 20s, there were no ACC in US. ACC, which is so like a stock market regulator. Similarly, the accounting standards also were not standard. There was no system of auditor doing the auditing. And what was the background? Somewhere around 1924, there was a person called Ivar Kruger. He was a Swedish investor, and he used to be known as Matchbox King. He used to make matchbox, and he was like a entire Europe, and he used to lend money to the governments after the World War I. So he also started his operation in America, US, and he started promising a huge amount of dividend, 25%, 30% dividend, and those dividends were not coming out from the profit, but from the the future subscription. So eventually it became a Ponzi scheme. And then after about 7-8 years, the entire system collapsed. The people during those days lost billions of dollars. And after that fall, this, the SEC, Security and Exchange Act, and then SEC was formed in 1931-32. So that was the one story that why this transparency is very, very important, and some regulation is very important. During the same time, there was another very interesting case. The the McKesson and Robinson. So there was a person called the McKesson. He was having a pharmaceutical company, and he was also trying to do so very inflated sales, inflated inventory, and this is how he was kind of misleading the investors. And he became so powerful that a Republican Party in 30s nominated him as a presidential candidate against Franklin Roosevelt. I mean, thank God that, he succeeded. Otherwise, he would have become the US president, and the Franklin Roosevelt wouldn't have become the US president. So, and he went on doing this, the fake invoice, fake inventory, the fake, all cooked up books of account. And this went on for almost 12 to 13 years. Finally, around 1935 or 36, the entire thing collapsed. And then again, people lost a lot of money. And that led to, the US regulations, where they said that there has to be an independent auditor. Those auditors have to be appointed by the independent, by the board of directors having independent directors. So the whole, the system of having a independent audit, that also came into this question. So when I look at, and then the various reportings that have happened on the sustainability, and then the greenwashing, and then all those things are happening, it reminds me of those days, 1920. And then, this regulation, then the law, and what we are doing in this sustainability today, I think it is similar to what was done in 1920s and 30s in the US, and that led to a very, very strong financial institutions, capital market, a lot of private investment flows in, and then the investors have a lot of trust. Similarly, on the sustainability front today, if you know the what ISSB has done, it's come out with these standards, and then there were multiple standards, and then trying to harmonize all the standards together, and then trying to promote countries to adopt, the companies to adopt. I think that is something which I see that it is that the 1920s moment insofar as the sustainability reporting is concerned. So I think this is extremely important. So what I am of the view that the when we are talking about the infrastructure or the finance or the private capital, the reporting, rigorous reporting actually creates, it's a transparency, and transparency leads to credibility, and credibility leads to confidence, and confidence leads to capital, right? So I think, I always say that a T is the transparency, then credibility, confidence, and capital. The T leads to triple C. So I think, this is the kind of a lesson which, at least, we all should understand, and then we should do this. And that is exactly what we have done in AIIB. We have gone for this ISSB reporting. We are working with the countries, various countries, and also our clients, because we also do a lot of financing to the private sector. And those private sector, when we have to report financed emissions, then naturally our clients also will have to, have some method of, reporting their financed emissions. So I think, we have shown the lead, and we have taken the lead, and we are kind of a prime mover. And I hope that, all the other MDBs, of course, the EBRDs are taking a lead. And as I said before, has gone one step ahead of us. That is, they have gone for the assurance, right? I mean, this is something which we will have to follow. And I'm not sure that, how soon we will be able to do that. Though personally, I would favor that we should do it as early as possible. So I think, this is a very, very good development. And we are thankful to ISSB for creating this movement, that 1920 movement, which, the entire, in the US, the entire capital market thing that happened. So I will stop here. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ajay. Thank you. A great advocate for ISSB. Couldn't have said it better. So now we're going to move on to the panel, and where we'll hear from our four wonderful panelists. You've heard from Ajay already. Maybe if I can just very briefly introduce the other panelists. We have Elizabeth Seeger, who is an ISSB member, and who has over 20 years of experience in standard setting, investment, and working on sustainability topic. And she joined the ISSB from the global investment firm KKR, where she served as managing director of sustainable investing. We then have Dr. Rachel Barza, who's an economist specialized in systemic resilience. And at the EBRD, she leads the climate adaptation and nature finance team. Thank you very much for joining us. And finally, we have Jukka Honen, who's the head of communications and a member of the executive committee of Nordic Investment Bank. And so he's the chief spokesperson of the bank, as well as overseeing the production of the bank's annual reporting, including sustainability report. So maybe actually if I can just start with you, Elizabeth. So AIIB just, Ajay very comprehensively described how ISSB standards enable transparency and trust that then enables scaled capital mobilization. So maybe you can give us a little bit more about why and how the ISSB standards make that possible from your standard setter perspective.
Standard setter perspective and my past life perspective as well. So first, this is the second time I've heard Ajay speak since I've been in Brazil, and it's always an amazing history lesson that not all of us know the history of financial accounting, and it's sort of how it's evolved over time. And you're talking about things that happened over 100 years ago, and it's, we're still tweaking the system, trying to get everything right. And now we're at this really important time around sustainability disclosure, sustainability financial disclosures as well. And so Ajay gave a good introduction into why it's important for investors. And so I'm not going to repeat too much, but I want to highlight a couple of things that I find are particularly important. First is that we're talking about information from companies that is material to them and material to their investors. And hopefully we'll talk a little bit more about materiality and and the different perspectives that one might take. I'll talk a little bit about the ISSB's perspective. And that is really important after many decades, well, many years anyhow, of companies reporting information in a way that wasn't perhaps decision useful for investors and maybe was obscuring information that was important for investors. So that's one. But then the other thing, and you talked about this quite a bit, is the question about quality of information. And for me, this is one of the greatest innovations of the IFRS Foundation's sustainability standards, is that we're bringing that rigor of accounting to a place where there hasn't been much rigor and authenticity around the world. So that, I think, is a really important thing that companies and jurisdictions are adopting and using the standards. We'll see a meaningful change in the quality of that information. So the way that we did this, hopefully everybody, what the ISSB standards are, is this not working well? Is it cutting out? It's okay? Okay. As you mentioned, they were in 2023, and the whole intention of it was to develop standards that would provide decision useful information to investors in a way that was also cost effective for preparers. And part of doing that was building on existing and well-used standards and frameworks that companies are familiar with, that investors are familiar with. So the ISSB was created through a merger of the Sustainability Accounting Standards Board, the CDSB, the Climate Disclosure Standards Board, as well as the Integrated Reporting Council, and then eventually also took over the work of the TCFD, the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosure. So now all of that is part of the ISSB and is part of the ISSB standards, which means that companies that are adopting it are building on many practices that they've established already, but we now have the accounting rigor that we're adding as well. So it was a really important for a number of reasons, including that because companies are familiar with it, they're able to start, many companies, not all companies, they're able to start from a place of understanding what it is that we're asking for. So today, are working on adoption. It's our #1 effort, and Ajay mentioned jurisdictions around the world, some of which are represented here today, many of which. And so we're counting almost 40 jurisdictions globally that are in some stage of the process of building regulations based on the ISSB standards. That represents more or approximately 60% of global GDP. That almost 40 does not include the state of California in the United States, which if we included it would change quite significantly. But the way that we're working with these jurisdictions is that we're trying to maintain the what we call the global baseline, sort of building block of disclosures for capital markets, but always recognize that, okay, now this is, yeah. Always recognizing that jurisdictions might have additional policy goals that they might want to achieve, and so that they could build on top of the ISSB standards, or that companies might want to speak to other stakeholders other than investors, and they could build on top of the ISSB standards. But what's really important is that we not further fragment that set of information that the global capital markets needs, that was reducing the cost effectiveness and also the decision usefulness of information. So I'll stop there, Rose. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth, for that comprehensive. And indeed, the ISSB today, the standards are adopted by nearly, or are being adopted by nearly 40 jurisdictions that represent nearly 60% of GDP and 40% of global market capitalization. So 2.5 years after the publication of the inaugural standards, I think I personally didn't think we would be there today. Maybe very briefly, Ajay, turning back to you, and then I'll turn to the other MDBs here. We heard from Elizabeth, and so would love to now have the MDB's perspectives on how applying the standards helps you bring transparency and comparability to your reporting. So AIIB, as you mentioned, was among the first MDBs to align its sustainability reporting to the ISSB. How can that transparency, and you spoke briefly to it, but maybe you have additional things to add, serve not just credibility, but also scale, so helping you mobilize capital in emerging markets that you serve?
Yes. So I think, as I mentioned before, that if you look at the structure of AIIB and then the way we work, I always say that the sustainability is in the genes of AIIB. If you look at our Article 1 of our Articles of Association, it says that our objective is to develop sustainable infrastructure and make investment in sustainable infrastructure and other productive sector. So what we are saying is that we are investing in sustainable infrastructure. So that is our, and also the environment and social standards. Then over the period of time, we have said that we will be aligned, every activity of AIIB will be aligned to the Paris Agreement. But all these things were happening on the basis of our self-declaration or self-reporting. But I think, what we needed to do, go beyond that and subject ourselves to the public scrutiny. And that is precisely what the ISSB reporting does. That when we report and when we publish our report, when we say that this is how we have complied to ISSB S1 standards, S2 standard, scope 3 emissions, financed emissions, many of those results that we give. Also, imagine the next year the people are going to compare that what you did last year and what you did in the current year, and therefore I think the people will get a more I would say that credible picture of what AIIB is doing, and particularly our investors, because what we depend upon, the capital, the way our bank is structured, that we have taken share capital from our shareholders once, and I see the chances of being it refinanced extremely difficult, because you'll have to go and convince 110 countries, and therefore we are heavily dependent on raising money from the market. And when you are going to raise money from the market, how it is different from any private corporation going to the market and raising money? Because investors, who are going to invest in those companies and or our bonds, they are going to look for some credible reports, and then and is where we find that ISSB reporting is extremely useful. It is not just some choice that we have made for just so that we just look good. So many times the people may feel that let's do this, we'll look good to the world. It's not that. It is a pure economic sense that we need to have such standards, and we should comply to those standards, and we report those standards. And what actually it does is that we are acting like a catalyst. When we start reporting, because we operate in 110 countries, then all those countries also get confidence, saying that look, if the bank can do this, then why the private corporations in those countries can also accept those standards. So I think this the entire adoption of those standards globally, I think this will create a movement, and this is precisely the MDB. We are not only supposed to do a investment. We should create an environment where a lot of public investment, private investment can come into this. And I think that is where the sustainability reporting is very, very critical.
Thank you so much, Ajay. And thank you again for your leadership there. Rachel, if I turn to you, EBRD just published its first ISSB aligned report building on 5 years of TCFD reporting, and you obtained assurance on your report, including selected metrics. And so well done to you as well for your leadership there. Would love to hear more about your experience over the past few years, including also you obtained assurance, including that process as well. I think the room could definitely benefit from that.
All right, how about this one? This one's better. All right, I feel like a bit guilty receiving all these congratulations because I'm just taking credit and speaking for my colleagues who drove that ambition. I'm on the team that was a bit scared of this, a bit nervous of getting scrutinized and audited in this way, but it's all worked out for the best. So I love that you started going back to World War I because I feel like we're on the same wavelength today. I'm not going to go back quite so far, but I do want to take you back to the fall of the Berlin Wall. This is where it all began for EBRD. Not going to go into so much detail, but we are a bank that was founded to foster the transition from post-Soviet countries to a competitive market economy. And so to be sitting here today and talking about ISSB and TCFD and disclosures, it's an amazing journey over not such a long time span to go from an iron curtain to a window, basically. We're extremely fortunate to be working in these countries in Eastern Europe, Central Asia, and now we have a movement into North Africa and Sub-Saharan Africa. And so that's all part of our journey. On our own disclosure front, as you said, we have 5 years of TCFD reporting. And a little brag on my colleagues' behalf there, we were also the first MDB to sign up for TCFD-aligned disclosures back when that all began. And it was on our radar already because in 2019, we issued a climate resilience bond. And when you're issuing a bond, you need a lot of transparency. You need that visibility to potential investors. So we were already thinking about the metrics we need to understand climate resilience. And that's my remit. And that's a tough one. Because people think accounting standards work because money is objective. It's not. It's not any more objective than a carbon or resilience measurement is. We think it's objective because we have the standards that we all report against consistently. It wasn't always like that. So we're really moving quite at pace. And over our journey, and starting with this TCFD disclosure, moving to ISSB, we've done a lot of internal work, and it's a good catalyst because, as a private sector focused bank, that investor confidence is critically important to us. So we've always been about transparency. Again, to semi-quote you, good governance is in our DNA. It's one of our core transition qualities. So we really have to walk the walk on this one as well. So undertaking those internal processes, aligning what's going to be reported on, making sure our data is quality, it's collected in the right time, the right place, the right information that investors want to hear about. It was a lot of work, and I'm going to be honest that the first ISSB disclosure was also a lot of work. But it's important because we operate in a lot of developing contexts, and with projects that have sort of new impact objectives that aren't always quite so well established and clear. So this transparency is really important to guard against greenwashing. We might not know exactly how to measure something yet. We're going to be very clear about what we are trying to do. So looking for an assurance, it was, I think it's trying to bring that credibility, not just to our own operations. Obviously, we want to demonstrate that there's a lot of different ways of calculating carbon emissions or resilience benefits. No one's got a clear answer on every single piece of that, but bringing in a third party to evaluate what we're doing internally, it just gives that little bit more reassurance that we're not making it up. There's a lot of scrutiny out there on what exactly is adaptation finance. And there's that scrutiny because no one is really confident about it yet. But by going under this assurance process, we say, we're at least open about it. We're willing to be looked at. Here are our books, here's our impact. It's for you to judge and then hopefully find sufficient. And so this is critically important to us also because, last year, for example, we invested over €1 billion in adaptation finance. And I'm really proud of that. That represents a lot of work from a lot of people across the bank. But it sounds like a really big number to me. It's not many, many multiples of my income and wealth. But in the scheme of things, that's not a big number. We need champions in finance globally. We're not going to get that. So our mobilization mission is really essential. Over the last few years, we've mobilized 1.8 times our investment in green finance. And that's significant, but obviously we need to do more. We want to do more. Our set of ambitions involves doing more. So we see that this disclosure process can enable that, not just giving investors confidence, but also reducing their due diligence burdens. Every second, every euro dollar not spent in double checking what we're doing is resources that can be dedicated to the next project. So to build on that investor confidence, that transparency, and to provide that accountability mechanism to inspire stakeholder confidence to enable additional finance to scale. That's what we're here for.
Thank you so much for that powerful intervention. Maybe now turning to Nordic Investment Bank. Yuka, as a veteran in sustainable finance, how did you come to choose the ISSB standards as well, and applaud also your leadership as a path in sustainability reporting?
Yes, thank you very much. I think what you mentioned is that NIB is indeed a veteran in sustainable finance, and that's why maybe our path is a little bit different from yours. What I have in my hand is the annual report from it's covering actually years 76 and 77, and it's 20 pages. And it's actually pretty good, because when you read this report, these 20 pages, it's not too long, but you get a really good picture of what the bank is actually doing. But of course, the downside is, if you think about from today's perspective, that there is nothing about sustainability. In fact, some of the wordings in the report are a little bit questionable from today's point of view, if you think about political correctness of sustainability. But that was the start. And then I would say that it was mid-90s that NIB basically started to include the environmental analysis in the projects that it's financing. And then it was 2005 when we got the mission to finance projects which are improving productivity and the environment. At that time, productivity was called competitiveness. But that was when we got the mission. And the follow-up for that was basically that we established our own mandate rating framework. It was kind of a taxonomy, and that was in a way our first sustainability reporting framework as well, because we were using this framework to actually show our impact. And if you look at what has happened then since those years, there have been very many different frameworks emerged, and sustainable finance has developed a lot. But for us, at some point, it was actually also a little bit frustrating that you had so many different frameworks and initiatives and abbreviations, because we were thinking that if you have one activity that you do, does it really add value that you have 10 different frameworks that you are using to somehow highlight the impact of this one activity? So would you rather use your energy to actually try to find new projects? And this is maybe a little bit the philosophy that reporting has always been extremely important for us, but it's the business first, and reporting is following that. It's very important, but you should put it into the perspective of the whole bank. Then we of course heard about the ISSB, and actually at the very early stage, when we heard about this, and we thought that, hey, maybe this is when we are going to see the light. And we happen to know quite well the chair of the IFRS Foundation, Erkki Liikanen, and we immediately invited him to the bank, and he was very passionately talking about this global new BentCook standard that will make this reporting uniform. So basically, we chose then our path, and we chose that we are going to use these IFRS sustainability disclosures standards. It was a natural choice from the point of view that our investors are global, but then of course one top which is important for us, that our customers are actually in our member countries, and they are mostly using the European standards. But still, we thought that ISSB is the right way for us to start. So we implemented the standards for the first time in the report 24. But we were still using this transition relief because we didn't have the financial risk assessment yet done. So what we have is not a separate report. We have had that also during the years. It's actually interesting if you look at how annual reports have been developing, how many different concepts you have had, but we have a combined report. So basically what you have in the report, that you have an index when you have each standard requirement, and then there's a commentary, and then there's a reference. This is where you find more information. One important is also that we have kept GRI reporting because we think that the impact materiality is a very important part. The financial materiality is not enough for us. And now for 25, we have conducted the double materiality analysis, which is basically capturing all sustainability risks and opportunities, and this we will add that into the next report. So we are basically working now how to present that. And maybe one just how we work in practice. One important element is that we have a very tight cooperation between the sustainability, of course, which is the substance, has the substance knowledge. Then the finance department is very important, and the risk department is very important, and then us communications. And we are really tightly working on it. And actually, we published the report also relatively early, so we aim at publishing it a little bit more in line with the commercial banks by the end of February. And we really try to have this as an efficient process, because it's also important, as I mentioned, that this reporting is efficient, and that's where the ISSB also is a good initiative. Maybe the last point is that, of course, because I'm also responsible for communications, that clarity is very important. This first report is very clear, so you need this reporting, you need those figures. But you also need to combine it with a very crystallized narrative. This is also important when the investor relations. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. So we've heard 3, I think, very powerful examples of how ISSB standards are being applied. I think from Ajay, we heard, the importance of this infrastructure of confidence that you're building, the comparability year on year, which is important when you're raising money from the markets. And it's not just about looking good, but it's also about being a catalyst for the adoption in client countries. From EBRD, from Rachel, we heard about the journey from issuing a climate resilient bond and then reporting on TCFD, and the importance of the transparency to guard against greenwashing, and how getting assurance was a further step in that process. And from NIB, we heard that ISSB was a natural choice in your journey, and I'm glad to hear you're using GRI, because the ISSB also works with GRI to try and build a seamless suite of standards. So it's great to hear that you're using that building block approach starting from the ISSB standards. So I think, we have a few minutes left, just over 10 minutes left. We've heard all these compelling examples of how the ISSB standards are being applied. And so I'd love to ask each panelist to share what comes next. So what's on the horizon for your institution, the next milestones, challenges to overcome. So maybe I'll start with you, Elizabeth, about in the broader context, what are the ISSB's next steps? And if I can just ask you to keep it to a few minutes.
Yes, thank you. I'll be efficient in this case. I would highlight 3 things that are our priorities right now. The first is supporting implementation of the standards. You can't have a global baseline if people aren't using it. So we are partnering with organizations around the world to support that, including some represented here as well. So that's pretty critical. As part of that, we're working on the interoperability between our standards and other standards, as Rose mentioned, to make sure we have what we call a seamless or easier pathway for companies that are seeking to navigate the various standards and frameworks out there. The second priority is jurisdiction, and this is not in order of priority, just in order of what I'm saying. The second being jurisdictional adoption. So as I mentioned, we're at almost 40 jurisdictions now, but for many of these jurisdictions, this is very new. And so our regulatory affairs team is working very closely with financial regulators and other regulators to support the use of the standards in a way that makes sense for those markets, but also that does not fragment the use of the standards by companies, because we want to make sure we aren't building in regulatory fragmentation around the world. And then the final priority that I'll mention is our research projects. So we have 2 research projects now to determine whether to go forward with standard setting. One is on human capital or workforce issues, and the other is our biodiversity ecosystem services, and also known as nature project, where we actually just made the decision last week to go ahead and move forward with standard setting of some kind, building on the recommendations of the Task Force on Nature related financial disclosures. So more to come on that, but that's a key priority for us as well.
Lots of work ahead. Ajay, maybe turning to you, what's next? What are your next priorities when it comes to ISSB implementation? If I could ask you in a couple of minutes to share that. I know it's hard to summarize, but
our next step, I will divide this into two parts. One is our internal. We are applying S1 standards and also the S2 and then financed emissions. We actually invest in multiple sectors. The transport, energy itself, we can have the solar, the wind power, and various other, and then, as I mentioned, the transport. Transport also, we have multiple modes of transport, construction of highways or the metros or the railways, the airports, and then we have health sector, we have hospitals, the equipment. So we are involved in the multiple sectors, and I'm glad that ISSB is also coming up with the sector-specific, I would say that kind of standards or the guidance as to how to comply with them, right? And this is something which we will, we'll look for, and maybe at some stage we would like to collaborate with the ISSB, and being one of the early ones, some of the MDBs can also participate in the framing of those standards, so that when those standards are released and they become more and more usable. So that is one side that we would like to apply to various sectors that we work. Now and similarly about the calculation of financed emissions in the various sectors, how exactly you do that? I think those are some of the things we'll have to build our own internal capability, because we are not used to doing that in that manner, even though we have been compliant in terms of our own ENS standards. But then this kind of a reporting is something which we will have to develop our internal capability, which we will be doing. The second part is the assurance part. Over the next few years, I think internally we will have to work towards that, so that we can also provide assurance, so that more transparency, more credibility, and then the more comfort to the investors. And then the third part is that external facing. That is, how do we work with the countries and also the our own clients or the borrowers? How do we make them adopt these standards, and then work with the countries and their regulatory institutions, improve their capacity, so that we have an entire thing lined up end to end.
Thank you, Ajay. Rachel, EBRD, you set a new bar with your Assured ISSB report. What comes next for you?
I think the constant treadmill of improvements, always trying to escalate ambition. We're now outside of our first year transition relief period, so we're going to have to keep up the work. We're working on our report now for 2025. We're going to expand the financial materiality assessment. The scope is going to be broader than climate, to more broad sustainability points. But I think it's also important that catalytic angle, because our green economy transition approach is not just about finance. We also have a 50% finance commitment, but it's about that systemic change and transition for our clients and our corporates and countries we work in, cities we work in, and how we support them in the disclosures. So I also wear a nature hat in addition to adaptation, so I'm looking forward to what's to come. But we're helping our first client with the nature-related disclosures, and I think that building on that work, bringing it to jurisdictions, because we work in countries from, Poland to Mongolia and Benin. They're just very different contexts. So keeping up our energies there, keeping up our clients' interest, and supporting them where they have their ambitions on disclosures as well.
Sounds like a lot coming ahead. Yuka, what about you? What is your path forward for the coming years, now that you've had, you have a long history of sustainability reporting, but what comes next?
Well, I think we have 3 points, and the first point is that we are continuing on the path of the IFRS disclosures and the GRI, but we need to keep an eye on also on the European standards because our customers are using them as well. So then we need to see how to present the double results of the double materiality analysis, and also update it then next year. And the last point is the assurance. We have had limited assurance on selected sustainability indicators, including financed emissions already since 2020. But now we need to work for more structured ISSB assurance.
You also have quite the path ahead. Maybe to close this session, I want to thank all our panelists for your valuable contributions, and to everyone still in the room listening to ISSB Standards, which I find fascinating, but you know, I'm a bit of a nerd. My thanks also go to Xing from the IAIB team for all the work to make this panel happen, and our colleague Aurora, who isn't here today. I think maybe the call to action, as we've heard from all of you, and you've all been incredible advocates, is that transparency is critical. So really, please continue, all of you, aligning with ISSB standards and moving towards that assured reporting, and continue also supporting client countries, that catalytic effect that you've all been talking about. And so, you know, in the decade of delivery that we have ahead, I think the ISSB standards are not just, as we've heard, a reporting standard, they're a scaling tool and a tool that can really be used strategically by multilateral development banks. So those are some final closing words, and thank you all so much for being here today.